So for those of you that are here, welcome. My name is Greg Shapiro. I'm the admissions advisor here at Divine Mercy University for the Spiritual Direction Certificate Program. With me today is Marion. She is a faculty member. So Marion, if you just want to share a little bit about yourself and what you do as part of this program, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I am a graduate from the School of Counseling at Divine Mercy University. And I've come back over the last year and a half or so and have been helping with residencies. And last year, I started teaching the SDC 300 class, which is the Relating Skills for Spiritual Directors, as well as the residency. And I've also facilitated some of the residencies.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Marion. So for those of you who are here, we're going to really just cover the details, and we're going to have some questions from Marion. And I think what's great about you being here, Marion, is the fact that I speak with so many people, and I've done presentations on this, but it's always helpful to have a voice coming from the faculty side. I've done many of these with active students and graduates, but hearing a voice from faculty is always helpful. So we're just going to cover the information. And for those of you who are here as guests, if any questions come up either for me or for Marion, feel free to drop them in the chat section or the Q&A section. We'll be sure to get to that, and we'll just go from there. So Marion, just to begin things, just as a faculty member, what makes this program very unique is the fact that we're training students on becoming solid spiritual directors, but the psychology component is what makes it really special. So how is a psychology component integrated into the SDC curriculum?
Yeah, I think it's done in a beautiful way in that we take what we have learned in the natural realm and apply it into the spiritual realm. It gives us the capacity to utilize the relating skills that have been tried and tested in the world of counseling or psychology or therapy, and bring them into the most important relationship in our life with God.
Yeah, that's great. I always, when I speak with students about this and they ask, how is it used or how is it utilized with this sort of human development component? One thing that I mentioned is that in the sixth course, the last course, because there are 6 courses in here. In fact, let me scroll down to the curriculum. In the course SDC 600 Advanced Prayer and Situations, one thing that we teach students in this one is how to, as spiritual directors, know their boundaries, how to stay in that lane as being their spiritual director. But along with that, if they're working with a directee who is battling some sort of mental health difficulty or has experienced some sort of trauma and it's recognized in these sessions, we also train them on how to gently and properly refer them to a licensed clinician if that's ever needed. So I think that's something that really makes this program really powerful, in that we're acknowledging each individual as being made in the image and likeness of God, that they're human persons, but there's more to them than just a mind. But we also want to make sure that that mind that God gave them is also being looked at thoroughly, but with the eyes of a spiritual director.
Yeah, that's really important because on my side of the world, it's not very uncommon for me to have people come in that have these wonderful spiritual stories, but upon a little bit of probing, you start to realize, there's something that's lacking there, and that it's not, that there is clearly some sort of mental illness that's going on that's affecting where they're at. And so just going to spiritual direction would be frustrating for the spiritual director and also not very effective for the person who's coming there.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Good. Well, I see that there's a few more guests here, so I'll just highlight what I mentioned early. As we're talking about the program, both Marion and I, who Marion's a faculty member, if any questions are coming up, feel free to drop them in the chat or Q&A section. So Marion, for a lot of the guests, I think many of them have experience with spiritual direction. Some of them have years of experience having spiritual direction. Some may even be active in offering spiritual direction. So they're looking at this program as a way to really add some skills and knowledge to what they're currently doing. But for some of the folks here, they might not be familiar with what it is. So, I mean, how would you describe exactly what spiritual direction is as a ministry?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I can do it exactly, but what I can say is that spiritual direction it's a way to have another set of eyes and ears on your situation and what's moving in your life with God. We often talk about spiritual directors as walking alongside the directee and sort of pointing a flashlight in the direction of an area that God may be moving in their lives, not to really be directive, but just to be present. And, there are things in our lives that we need clarity on. We just don't see it ourselves. And having that extra set of eyes and ears can be a huge benefit.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use the flashlight analogy, because I remember for one of the residencies, we had a student here, and the way that he described spiritual direction, I thought it was a great way of doing it. He said, spiritual direction is two people walking through a dark room, and it's the director that has the lantern, and he's the one shining at different parts of the room and just making observations, but it's up to the directee to take what's being shown to him and apply it in a way that will help him find his way into the light. And I thought that was a great way of putting it. We look at it as sort of a sojourning experience.
Yeah, very much so. It's a journey. It's not a one and done sort of thing. It's really beginning on a path.
Yeah, great, good. Excellent. Well, if anyone has any questions, feel free to share those right now. Maybe we can look a little bit at, because you focus on SDC 300, this is where the first residency takes place. So maybe you can share a little bit about what you teach, what happens in that course, and also what happens within that residency.
Yeah, that course, it's interesting because when I stepped into this world, I often find that students are a little confused because there's been a shift. The 100 and the 200 courses are very focused on a spiritual nature and kind of looking inside and yourself and how the person develops. But when we shift into 300, we're really focusing on those psychological skills. The spiritual component is still there, but we're really working to teach skills like reflecting. This is what I think I heard you say, and which can help deepen a conversation. There's nothing better than having a person who can reflect back what you've said, to know that you've been heard and there's real attention there. And we look at things like validating and enhancing and all of these little skills, which not only are they going to help you as a spiritual director, but in your relationships, it changes the way we listen, because now it's not listening to respond. We work on listening to hear.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, and then from the course, we build up in those skills, and students will work in triads. So this is their first opportunity to get to practice. And normally the nerves come out a little because you've got new people and you've got to record these, and I'm going to watch them. But I keep telling students, we're just looking for the skills. You don't have to play director. You don't have to do anything else. Just focus on the skills and learn them. And they build gradually. And so that by the time we get to week 7, where they come in for residency, first of all, you know your classmates. And most people we find are longing to connect with people in a way that's not Zoom. You know, we're all over that and we want to connect. And so they come in and it's just a beautiful opportunity. And then during that time, they have an opportunity to really take and refine these skills. You work in groups of 3 or 4 with a faculty, and a lot of times your faculty will vary. Some of us are counselors, or I think counselors or psychologists, and then we have some people that are spiritual directors. So you're going to get both sides, both perspectives, and just different styles, but learning how to continue to listen and deepen the relationship between the directee and God. And by the end of it, they don't want to go home.
That's what I've noticed, by the way. It's really interesting because, you know, for the guests here, a lot of you might be trying to figure out exactly what to expect in the residencies. I'll first preface that, you know, in this one, we're not expecting you to relocate. The residencies only last for a few days. And the first one happens, again, in SDC 300. That's about 10 months from when you start the program, more or less. And we'll make sure that you know exactly when this falls, the exact date, so that you can prepare for that. You can let your family know, your employer, that you'll be away for a couple of days. Well, more specifically, from Wednesday until Sunday afternoon. But what's interesting is the students that I speak with when they're here on campus, and I get to sit with them and have lunch and just talk to them about how this is going. They seem to really enjoy it because they're learning this. They feel called by God to serve as spiritual directors, and this is where it begins to feel more alive for them, where they're face to face with their cohort, who they've gotten to know over the discussion boards and just that sort of engagement. But now they're actually seeing them face to face, and they're all here to dive even deeper and hone in even further into the skills. And there's always such a joy from them, which is really interesting. Even the ones that kind of were a little bit nervous about it, they seem to enjoy it, which I think is great.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, I can even say as a faculty, it is, I don't come away from the weekend feeling like exhausted or like I've been working all weekend. It's actually really refreshing because you have an opportunity to be in a room with people who are really not only seeking to deepen their own relationship, but are seeking to help others in that. And it's a great group of people to be with.
Yeah.
And I can't speak to the SDC residencies, although I have heard that often the people you meet in the residencies become lifelong friends. I can say that that's very much been true with the group of students that I did residencies with in the counseling program. And yeah, they're some of my best friends. So
Yeah. That's excellent. I think that's also one of the great things about it. I'll just take a moment to talk about the populations of the cohorts, because, you know, we have a couple of pictures here on screen from a few folks and from a few cohorts a couple of years ago. And If you'll notice, there's a diversity of vocations. We have lay people, priests, deacons, married people. Sometimes you have married couples that are active in the program, lay consecrated. It's really a mixed bag. But again, another thing that when I speak with them about this, and what's it like being in a cohort with someone in a completely different vocation from you, they always share that actually enriches it more and more. They're learning a side of spiritual direction from a colleague of theirs in the program that is in a completely different vocation. And so if they were going to work with a directee that's part of that vocation, they're going to have more insight because of this perspective that they got in their class. So, I mean, one of our faculty members, one of our students, he's a priest. I had a webinar with him a few months ago, and he shared his spiritual director is a lay woman, and it's actually been beneficial for him because he's a diocesan priest, and he needed that so that he can better serve his parishioners. And so, you never know who you might end up working with as a directee. It might be a lay person or someone in a religious order or a diocesan priest. It could be anyone, but having this cohort, you gain this camaraderie, and you even gain this this new sort of perspective, which is very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Everything you said is so true. Just you get to meet people from all different walks of life that are all with a single purpose.
Yeah, great. Let's see. I'll also, since we're here on the residencies, I'll share something with the students, and then we can go into another topic. But common question is, how do the residencies work logistics wise? And again, there's one during the third course, about 10 months from when you start the program. And then there's one during the fifth term. So a little bit toward the tail end of the program. And they go from Wednesday evening. That Wednesday evening is more of a meet and greet. And then Thursday morning until Sunday afternoon will be these activities that Marion shared of lectures that you attend and group sessions, basically mock spiritual direction sessions. You're evaluated. You're evaluated by spiritual directors and by therapists, and really just a way to hone in deeper. But these happen on campus. We're in Sterling, Virginia. I live in DC, so it's about 35 minutes from, it takes me about 35 minutes to get from home to campus. But we're literally around the corner from Dulles Airport. It's a 5-minute drive. So for those of you that would be flying in, what will happen is a shuttle will pick you up and take you to your hotel where you're lodged, which is the Marriott. It's pretty much right next door. It's walking distance. So everything is in very close proximity, just to make it more, more convenient for you. One last thing, by the way, about the residencies. A common question I get is, what if a residency happens to fall on a week that you can't make? Let's say you have a wedding or scheduled surgery. That's fine. What you could do is take a leave of absence. That's a great time to take a leave of absence, meaning you're pausing the program. You're taking a step back from that term so that you can attend what what's priority. And then when you're ready to jump back into the program, you'll just get reinstated, and you'll pick up from where you left off at any point in the year that works for you. Because we have 3 start dates per year, and the program is active. All the courses are active throughout the academic calendar. So you wouldn't even have to wait a whole year. You could jump back in whenever you're ready. Marion, anything to add to that before I continue?
One of the other things that I do hear about the residencies is that sometimes people will ask, can I go see family or friends or have my spouse or kids come with me? And I like to always let them know that this is a little bit like a retreat, and part of the residency does include a retreat. And you really need to commit to being present for it. There are maybe extreme circumstances where you'd have someone with you because it was necessary. But in general, you will probably have a better experience if you can just put it aside and say, I'm going to arrive at, the Fairfield Inn at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to do the meet and greet. And for the time that I'm here until I leave on Sunday afternoon. This is what I'm doing. This is my purpose. And you'll find that it's so much more freeing and less stressful.
Yeah, yeah, great. I'm glad you brought that up. Good. Let's see. So, why don't we go into the next topic? I think for a lot of folks, one question that they have is, what is required in order to enroll in the program? And we'll talk about the online portion as well, and the time commitment and the cost. But just coming from the admissions side of it, one requirement is that you do have experience with your own spiritual director. In other words, that you've had at least a year of experience having spiritual direction. If you don't currently have a spiritual director, that's fine. And we can talk about that one-on-one on what would be necessary next. But as long as you've had a year of experience, I'd say within the past 5 years, probably no more than that, then that's a good place to begin. The next thing, though, it would be required that you do have a spiritual director by the time that you're active in the program. So in other words, I'd say at the absolute latest, a week before class begins, you must have officially a spiritual director. If you don't currently, I don't want you to feel like the door is closed. There are some circumstances and some nuances, and we can talk more about that. But it would be important that as you're active in the program, you do have a spiritual director. Marion, anything to add to that?
Not really about having the spiritual director, other than to say, you need to do what you're planning to do. If you're going to offer spiritual direction, you need to be in direction.
Yeah.
And of course, there's also the interviews and references that come in. I know that I've participated in interviewing some new students or potential students as they're coming in.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Marion, there was a question from Heidi, and looks like she's just catching up. But one question she had, I understand that the whole program is around 2 years. Also, how many hours a week of study is generally involved? Heidi, that's a great question, because I know that the time commitment is very important for many of you. You guys are have a busy work life or busy home life or life in ministry. So this would be a good time to talk about the time commitment. So it is a 2-year program. There are 6 courses in total. And as students, you're only taking one course at a time. Usually in doing that, I'd say on the safe end, just as a pattern, we see students committing somewhere between 6 to 9 hours per week. It could vary. There might be some weeks where you're breezing right through the information, and there might be other weeks where you need a little bit more time to absorb the content. But I'd say on the safe end, just to be more conservative, look at your own schedule and see if you can allow for 9, maybe 10 weeks, 10 hours per week. For some of you, it might just mean, moving a few things around in your schedule. Or I always tell people, look at your own community within your own family, or if you're active in parish life, see how this could be made possible. If there's anything that could be done to lighten your current load in order to commit to, again, on the safe end, about 9 hours a week. So that's typically what it looks like. But another thing is there's a lot of breathing room in the program. Between every single course, there's going to be a break. And on the short end, the shortest break is 6 weeks. The other breaks, I think typically the transition from fall to spring and spring to summer are about 9 to 10 weeks. So this gives students a chance to take a step back, to reflect on the content that they're learning. If they wanted to schedule vacations during this time, they could do that. Major holidays happen during these breaks as well. And it's also a great time for students to replenish their funds as they're going through the program to make it more affordable, because it's a pay-as-you-go program. So having these breaks, this means that this gives you, maybe 14 to even 18 weeks to replenish your funds and save up for the next course. So hopefully that answers your question, Heidi. But I think that's a great question. I know that, again, time commitment is a big part of this.
Yeah, I think sometimes people, I'd say 6 to 9 is great. When you start to do the triads in the 300 and kind of going forward, sometimes it takes a little bit more logistics, because you might be in a triad with people that are in different time zones or different states of life that they've got to work around in a full-time job or something like that. But that's the general. And then there's so much more material that if you want, you can spend a lot more time going deeper.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. In fact, Marion, that does transition into a question that I have for you. Because again, for some cases, especially when with SDC 300, there's sort of a new way of looking at spiritual direction. If a student needs assistance and needs more guidance from the instructor, how do they get in touch with those of you that are teaching the courses?
Yeah, our course is very, very friendly. What you'll find, you'll have emails, access through Canvas, which is our online learning program. In most cases, I think everybody, all of us, disclose our phone numbers. So you can, I tell my students, text me if you've got a question. That's how you'll get me the quickest. We're available. And also, I would point out that all of the faculty and staff are available. Like even Maria, as director of the program, makes herself available if there's a need. And if there is a need for some sort of remediation or assistance, there's going to be people there to support you through it.
Yeah, that's great. And that I've seen that too, that just how great the instructors are in getting in touch with their students. But I'll even say this now, and this is something that I say to every student: if, as you're active in the program, and I think our faculty is great at getting in touch with students, the staff here is great. If for whatever reason you're having any sort of difficulty getting in touch with a certain department or a certain instructor, as you're enrolling, I am your main point of contact before you actually get started. So you'll have my telephone number, you'll have my email. So if by the time you're active in the program and you're having any sort of difficulty getting in touch with the right person or the right department, let me know. Reach out to me. I'm happy to get you in touch with the right person. The last thing we want for the students is to feel stranded. We want to make sure that you thrive. And I feel like even as admissions, when I'm no longer your main point of contact, I have a responsibility to make sure that you are doing well in the program. So I'll just put myself out there as well, just to make you feel a little bit more comforted. So let's see, we talked about the time commitment, and we talked about the residencies. The practicum, this is where students are now active, boots on the ground, active as spiritual directors, working with others and logging those hours with an instructor. So this is something that happens during, it gets launched in the 5th course. that second residency, which happens during course 5, that residency serves as a launch into your practicum hours. So, Marion, I know that you instruct for 300, but you have a little bit of experience regarding the practicum. If there's anything that you could share just from your perspective, that would be great.
Yeah, well, what you said exactly is that the 500 is going to launch you into their, it's going to set you up to know, how do you start? How do you stop? How do you deal with boundaries? What do you do if things are kind of unusual? What do you help? It also gets you working with supervision and knowing what it's like to be able to have a situation with a directee that you can take to a supervisor, ask questions in a confidential way, maintaining confidentiality, and have someone else to see it with a different set of eyes to give you feedback. And this is, I feel like this is really vital, even as a counselor. I finished my supervised hours a long time ago, but I still do at least 2 or 3 hours of supervision every quarter to keep me going. And this will get you started in that. It also talks about what it's like. How do you log your hours? How do we keep track of that? What are you going to be meeting? How do you set fees? All those sorts of things. Do you set fees? Different things. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you also brought that up regarding fees, because that is a question from some folks about, is this something that one could have an income off of? And, for some people, they do this as a service, especially those that are active in their priestly vocation or in their religious vocation or in the diaconate. That typically wouldn't be the case. But I've met spiritual directors that are perhaps contracted by the diocese, and in order for them to continue offering this service, there might be an income connected to it. Both options are fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And in the program, we do teach the students on, if they are receiving payment for the service, how it's applied, would it look. So, even if that's something that you're exploring, or even if you're not sure if you want to do this as, a service with no charge, or if in order to make it possible, you would like to see some sort of compensation for it, we'll teach you on that. We'll make sure that you know exactly what it looks like. So with that, what I want to do is just hash out very quickly on what the online portion looks like. We talked a lot about residencies and practicum, a lot of the face-to-face component, even though that's probably not the majority of what you'll see as you're active in it. But the program is primarily done online. And not only that, it's also done asynchronously. For many students I speak with, I ask them if they're familiar with synchronous versus asynchronous. I'd say about 90% of the students, maybe more. This is their first time hearing this phrase. And asynchronous would mean that as a student, you can log into your classes at any point that works within your schedule. That's the standard format for this. As Marion mentioned, we use Canvas as the platform. So what you're doing generally is communicating with your instructors and with your cohort through discussion boards. So just as an example, I'd like to use Facebook as an example, that's sort of like a discussion board where someone might post a topic, and then you'll have individuals responding to that and engaging with each other based on that topic. But you also have your modules lined up for you. So when you log into Canvas, you'll see your assignments, and it's up to you when in the week you want to sit down, read your material. If there's written assignments for you, to sit down and write that. But in short, that flexibility is there for you. It's up to you when you want to log in and take action on those assignments.
I would add, Greg, though, just to know that occasionally some of the instructors will offer optional synchronous classes where you can join in and get online with your instructor. There might be a didactic part, or there might just be a practicing of skills so that you have that one-on-one immediate feedback. So that can be an option, but they're optional and we record them if you can't make them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too, because even though we say that asynchronous is the standard format, there is option for having that engagement in real time, one-on-one with instructors, or correct me if I'm wrong, Marion, but I believe there might even be on occasion a group assignment, and if that happens, usually the students will come together. I think they typically choose Zoom, but just more of a just a platform that folks seem to know well, and they put their heads together to choose a time. So it's not like if you're in a location where your time zone is completely different from here, or if they're choosing a time that you just wouldn't be able to make, then you're out of luck. This is something that as a small group you'll be able to decide on together so that you can all make that. So yeah, there will be some periods where you are communicating in real time, but as a standard, that flexibility is there as far as when you want to log in and take action on your assignments. So let's see, Marion, anything else to add here before I get to the financial piece?
Yeah, the other thing I think is worth talking about briefly is the technology side of it. I recognize, and this program recognizes, that not all of our students are traditional students. Not everyone grew up with a laptop and a cell phone in their hand. And so sometimes the technology piece can feel really daunting. And I just kind of want to speak to that a little bit to say, first of all, when it comes to Canvas, our school platform, there's a really excellent online help support that will guide you through problems. I've heard several students that have struggled with different things and have been on and gotten great responses. Figuring out, how do I use Zoom? How do I record sessions? We make sure that you can do that. I teach the 300 class, which is the first time that you're required to turn those sorts of things in. I have videos on how to do it. And I've been known to sit on the phone with students and help them walk through and figure out how to do it. So I just want to encourage people who might have parts of them that are afraid about the technology to not necessarily let that be a barrier for you.
Yeah, Marion, thank you so much for sharing that. And I second it. This is very common. I wouldn't want you to feel concerned about that technology component. It's very common too. Once a student is admitted, they go through a process of getting access to their DMU email, and they need to do that in order to sign their enrollment agreement form, which then once they sign it, gets them registered. And usually there's a few students that is having difficulty logging in. That's normal. I wouldn't want you to feel you're not stupid if you're having difficulty with it. I would probably be one of those people too. So it's perfectly fine. And the IT department, they're really good at helping the students out. They're typically, every time I speak with the students that are having trouble with that, they get access into their email pretty much the same day. So again, we're here to help out, and even with the orientation, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But the orientation is there to help you out too, to get some clarity on what to expect in the program, the departments to get in touch with. And again, if you're struggling with anything, you have my contact information. I'm happy to redirect you. So you're in good hands.
Yeah.
Good. So let's see. Just to highlight, if any of you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or Q&A. We're going to go over a Q&A at the end once we cover all the rest of the details. But if any of those questions are circling your heads now, feel free to share those now and we'll be sure to get to them. But with that said, I know that a big part of this, time commitment is usually a deciding factor for many of you, and the cost is another one. So I want to take a moment just to talk about that. And so I will preface first, right now we're looking at the cost of the program, the cost per course and the cost per residency. But just to preface, the cost per course could potentially be reduced. What I'd want to do is have a conversation with you one-on-one and cover what you're eligible for in order to bring the cost down, because there is room for that. But as a baseline, the cost per course, and again, you're paying course by course. You're not expected to pay the whole program in one lump sum. So the cost per course is $778. And then the residency cost is $1,000. Again, there are 2 residencies, so you pay this $1,000 twice within the 2 years. And that $1,000 is going to cover your lodging, it'll cover your meals, it'll cover your materials. So the only thing that you're responsible for out of pocket would be your travel, but everything else will be covered under that $1,000 when it comes to the residencies. Now, one thing, as far as how does billing happen, I know that's another common question, because you're paying course by course, it's a pay-as-you-go program. The way it works is before each class, about 2 or 3 weeks before each class begins, each student is invoiced. And at the point of being invoiced, you have a 30-day window to pay that balance. So you can pay it in increments, or you can pay the full $778, or whatever it may come out to be, depending on if there's any reduction possibilities. You'll have that balance to pay within 30 days. So again, we have those breaks between each course also to help with students if it allows them a little bit more time to replenish their funds as they're going through it. So I always tell students, if God is calling you to serve as a spiritual director and you're enthusiastic about the curriculum that we offer, the human development component that makes this program so special, then I would encourage you to see to look at how this is possible. And I think with the breaks between, many times it really does allow for funding to be way more possible than you might even realize. But for some of you, I even encourage you to, especially those of you that work in ministry, get in touch with your parish, get in touch with your diocese. They might be interested in helping you with funding. I have seen that before. For many of them, they would see that as an investment. Having a stronger spiritual direction presence in the diocese or in your parish might be what they really want. And so they might be happy to help out with the funding. So if that's something that you're also looking at as a possibility, have that conversation with them. The worst that they'll say is, no, I'm sorry, we can't do it, but it wouldn't hurt to ask, and they might really be eager to help you out with that process. So let's see, Marion, any thoughts or questions here before I continue? I didn't think so.
I think the only thing maybe you didn't miss is that they do get to do dinners. Dinners are on your own for 3 nights, but there's lots of options. Most people, I see a lot of orders brought in and people sitting in the dining room at the restaurant or at the hotel having dinner together. So
Yeah, yeah, good. I'll also mention too, regarding the residencies, if you have any sort of allergy or some sort of dietary need, let us know. We'll accommodate that.
And the food is good. It's
Yeah,
not, it's not like cafeteria food. It's like real good food.
yeah, yeah. Whenever the residencies happen, I come down to join the students and I have lunch and I like it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, why don't we very quickly just go into the application process and then we'll jump into the Q&A. I know that we have maybe about 10 minutes, but I think we can do this pretty quickly. So as far as applying, I do want to say very quickly, we have 3 start dates per year: spring, summer, and fall. Right now, we're enrolling for the summer term. That's going to start on May 24th. And we still have room for this one. If God is calling you to this, if you really feel the nudge from God to serve as a spiritual director, and you feel that you're discerning, this might be where your discernment it has brought you to. And I would encourage you, if you're really interested in starting in the summer, now is a great time to apply. And the application process is fairly simple. The only things you would need to do would be, one, filling out an application form. It's a very short form. It's not a standard college application. I think it's something that you could probably fill out in about 5 to 10 minutes. And we have a code here. If you look in the red box, feel free to screenshot that, take a picture of it. That code will waive the fee. It'll be a free application for you. And then once the application form has been filled out, the next steps would be to, one, it would be to get your recommendations. One would come from your spiritual director, and it would be from your current spiritual director. So if you have any previous spiritual directors, even if you have more experience with the previous one than you do with your current one, the current one will actually have more weight. That's actually what the faculty wants. So one would come from your spiritual director. The second one would come from your either your pastor or your superior, depending on if you're active in your parish or if you're active in religious life, or in consecrated life. And then the third recommendation will come from pretty much anyone of your choice other than a relative. But this could be a friend, it could be a fellow parishioner, a colleague, basically anyone that knows you well that would serve as a good voice on your behalf. So once we have these first and second steps completed, the final step would be to sit in on a group interview. And this always happens on a Monday evening. It goes from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. It happens over Zoom. And it's really just a chance for the faculty members to get to know you, to witness your interpersonal skills, your listening skills, your ability to speak on certain topics. And Marion is often one of the faculty members that participates in facilitating. So Marion, I know that we're running short on time, but if there's anything that you'd like to share about the group interview, then that would be great.
I would just say, I don't want to spoil the interview process, but I would say that sometimes people also find from the group interview, it's kind of nice because that might give you a couple other faces of your peers who will be with you in the courses too.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. The fact that it's a group process, I want you all to know that you're not competing for a seat. It's really designed so that it's almost like, this might be maybe not the right way of putting it. I hope I'm not spoiling anything either, but almost like a mock spiritual direction session. They just want to see your potential in this.
Yeah, or a coffee table discussion.
Yeah, I like that.
Something's coming up
Yeah.
with a matter of the faith, then how do you handle it?
Yeah, great, good. All right, well, it's 7:51, so now would be a great time to just open up the floor to all of you who are here to learn about the program. Some of you might be trying to come up with your questions. So as questions come in, feel free to share them in the chat or in the Q&A. Either myself or Marion will answer those. But I'll kickstart. I'll kick off the first question. I think a common question that I see. So Marion, this is spiritual direction from the Catholic tradition. Its influences are St. John of the Cross and St. Ignatius and St. Francis. But for many students, some of them aren't Catholic. And I think for many of them, they might think that it's a requirement to be Catholic. Is that a requirement? Is it necessary that someone is Catholic to be in the program?
No, it's not a requirement that you be Catholic. I would say the requirement is that, your belief system be congruent enough that the direction will work, but it's really about the skills more so than anything else. That, how do I do this? And I've seen numerous people apply it to different faiths and have really gained a lot out of it.
Yeah, great. I'll say, just from the admissions advisor side, I regularly enroll students that are non-Catholic Christians. Many of them are evangelical, non-denominational, but what they all have in common is this love to serve God and to serve others in spiritual direction. So again, if you are really being drawn to this ministry but you're not Catholic, you're more than welcome to reach out to us, and we would love to have you here. So let's see. One other question is, what advice would you offer to a student that is discerning this process, discerning going into this ministry?
I think the advice I would offer is to remember that discernment is ongoing. You can decide and go through the process and start the program, and you might go through one or two or three classes and still be weighing, is this what God is calling me to do? And that's okay. You don't have to have all of the answers up front. I know some of us have planners that really want to know it, have it all laid out, but this is one of those places where you have the opportunity to continue to discern as you go through the process. And, I'm not aware of a lot of people that leave the program, but in the one or two that I do know, they don't regret what they've done. They just have discerned that it's not the path for them, because the learning and the skills that you're going to gain are going to benefit you no matter what you do.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And Maria, the program director, Maria Brackett, has shared before that the first three courses are also designed to help folks who are still in discernment and trying to figure out if this is what God is calling them to. And like you said, now and then students will discern out of this ministry when they're active in the program. But the skills and knowledge that they learn are very much overlappable with other ministries and other things that they might do. So it wouldn't be all for naught. It would be something that you would still learn and be very fruitful within whatever God is calling you to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions here, but I know that, if you're like me, the questions are going to hit you the next day. So my contact information is here on screen. You're more than welcome to email me, to call me, to text me. I would love to speak with each of you one-on-one if this is something that you're looking to. If you want to rehash the content with me again, more than happy to do that with you. I'm here just to give you all the information and to make sure that you're comfortable with the program. So with that said, it is about to be 8. It doesn't look like we have any other questions here. But again, if you'd like to apply, the code is here on the screen. Feel free to hang on to that code if you wanted to fill out a free application. So, Marion, thank you so much for sitting in on this webinar. It was just great getting to hear faculty's voice and just sharing about the greatness and richness of this program.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been good. It was nice to put a face to an email name that I see all the time.
Yes, yeah, likewise. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Again, you have my contact information. Let me know if you have any questions. So with that said, thank you. Have a great night and God bless.
Bye-bye.